Kevin, I'm looking here at the Bloomberg. The Senate clears the stopgap spending bill. Trump set to sign today. He's due to speak at an NRA event in Atlanta, presumably sometime between now and midnight. He's going to sign this thing. Here we are again, another short-term spending bill.
Another short-term spending bill. They've kicked the can down the road just 1 week. Of course, President Trump and top Republicans looking to avert a partial government shutdown at any cost. They do not want to have a government shutdown on the eve of President Trump's 100th day in office. I can tell you that all day I've been talking with top Republicans here as well as their staffers in the halls of Congress. They are looking to hit it big next week in terms of hopefully having some type of health care policy legislation move. But House Speaker Paul Ryan is adamant, David, he does not want to have any type of legislation presented on the floor fail. But who would have thought? Here we are talking to Megan Murphy and David Gura and Sahil Kapur on the day 99 of President Donald Trump's first term in office.
Kevin, Cirilli, come back to you in just a moment here. Megan Murphy, let me ask you about what we've learned about governing here over these last 99 days. You have a president who had no Washington experience before, running a White House, trying to interface with Capitol Hill. Here we are with another short-term stopgap spending bill. What's this White House learned over 99 days about how to govern?
Well, I think Donald Trump said it best himself in a recent interview, in fact, with Reuters, saying it's much harder than he thought it was going to be, and not just on health care, but on a wide variety of things. Look, let's look at the stopgap spending bill. I think I've heard it said best when this was really a display of basic competence rather than legislative achievement. Obviously, we come up to the 100 days tomorrow without anything hugely significant they can point to on the legislative front. They're really looking at the Supreme Court as something that they're going to be trumpeting, rolling back regulations, plotting out a chart forward and looking at North Korea and some of the foreign policy victories that they think they've had. But in terms of getting that signature piece of legislation, especially on healthcare tax reform, with so many of the details yet to be released, yet to be discussed, yet to be even presented in a format that even other people in government can understand what the plan is, that's something that I think they're going to have to learn much more quickly how to get people behind them when they really want to push these reforms. Sahil
Kapur, you covered taxes in part here. I look at that one-page document that was handed out to reporters at the White House on the 96th, 97th day of this administration. What are lawmakers saying about what was in that? We are getting some points of debate. They can talk about some of these things that the White House has put down to paper, but this is a pretty thin document, I think you'd agree.
David, it is a pretty thin document, much thinner, in fact, than President Trump's tax plan that he proposed as a presidential candidate last year and in 2015. But look, this is a long, long way to go. This is just the beginning of what is going to be a brutal and painful debate if they're going to get something done like they did in the 1980s, the last time there was a big rewrite of the tax code. Overall, the president has not had a major legislative achievement to his name. What he's done most significantly is deregulation through a series of executive orders and fast-tracking through the Congressional Review Act, particularly things that President Obama did late in his term. These are significant things. I don't want to downplay them, but the interesting thing here, David, I think to know is that deregulation is the one thing that the divided camps in the White House seem to agree on. I would split them up into three. There are the economic nationalists, there are the ideological conservatives, and then there are the New York pro-business types, and there's very little they all agree on. And the president himself doesn't seem to have a particularly fixed ideology. He listens to different sets of people on different issues, and that's why we've seen sort of a scattershot approach to something like healthcare, which has died 3 deaths already in the first 100 days. We don't know if and when it's going to come back, but the president has not set forth on a consistent path where he's constantly pushing everybody in the same direction. That is going to be the big challenge, and that has been the big learning experience on domestic policy. On foreign policy, he's also pointed out that he's understanding the complexity of certain issues. North Korea, for instance, he wanted to take on China, call them a currency manipulator. Well, you need them to take on North Korea. He wanted to not intervene in the Middle East. Well, he also wanted to punish Assad with, for the use of chemical weapons and cozy up to Russia, which is allied with Assad. It's all these interconnected and complicated things are, I think, in front of him now, and he's realizing it's much more difficult, as Megan
Murphy, Sahil's talking about the composition of this administration. To my mind, there are two ways of looking at these first 100 days. You can look retrospectively and see what they've done or not done. On the other hand, you can look at those first 100 days and see how has this administration staffed up the administration itself? What direction is it headed in? There are still many quiet corridors of the State Department, for instance. There are offices that haven't been filled, nominations that haven't even been put forward. What do we know about who is forming, who's going to be driving this administration going forward?
Well, that's an excellent point, and I think why you've seen also so little progress made on some of these legislative initiatives. They simply don't have the people to put the flesh on the bones, whether that's tax, whether that's foreign policy. It's crickets in some quarters of the State Department still, and that is a huge impediment to really getting the detail that you need to flesh proposals put forward. But I think it's an interesting point you make. Either we can look retrospectively or we can look forward. If we're taking the past 100 days and we give it even a charitable explanation that it's been chaotic, that it's been bumpy, that they've learned a lot about governing, that this was an administration that crafted a sort of pro-business approach. I can tell you this much, if you were 100 days into the CEO-ship of this presidency, you'd be facing a lot of angry shareholders. So they're going to need to have to figure out a way, if they're going to adopt this business-like approach, they better figure out a way to get shareholders, which is actually the American people, behind the programs they're crafting at a 40% approval rating, the lowest we've ever seen at this point in a presidency. They're sure not being successful at that so far.
Kevin Cirilli, lastly, let me look ahead with you. As I mentioned, the president is traveling to Atlanta. He's going to speak at an NRA event today. Tomorrow night, he'll be speaking in Pennsylvania. He is somebody who, on the campaign trail, liked to travel. He would come home at night and stay in his own bed, but he was on the trail a lot. Why hasn't he traveled more, and what do your sources in the White House say about when he's first going to go overseas, and if we might see him making his case to the American people more domestically?
Yeah, I can remember then candidate Trump covering him until like 2 a.m. in the morning when he would finish his rallies. But look, this is a candidate this is a president who loves to campaign. But the bottom line is he's not in campaign mode right now. He needs to be working with Congress. I can tell you that the sources I'm talking with tell me that this is a situation where you have top principals, people like President Trump and Vice President Pence themselves negotiating with lawmakers. That might work in business, but it's a different reality on Capitol Hill. And there are pluses and minuses that they are trying to correct course on as they pivot to tax return, learning lessons from healthcare.